Good evening and welcome to the Saratoga Springs Planning Commission meeting for June 10th, 2021. I have asked Shelley Barch to lead us in our pledge. She could come forward now. Thank you.
Will the audience please rise? Please follow me as we repeat the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated.
Thank you, Shelley, for that. Can everybody hear me?
It doesn't sound like the mic's on. They're just quiet.
Okay, well, I'll try to speak louder. Our next item on the agenda is roll call. All of the commissioners, except for Commissioner Bryce Anderson and Commissioner Ryan Reed, are both on work assignments, and so they are excused for the evening. Our first item number 3, is a public input item. Time has been set aside for anybody that would like to make comment on anything that's not currently on the agenda. So if you're here on an agenda item, just wait and hold your comments till that agenda item comes up. But we do allow comments from the public on any other items. So if anyone would like to make comment, I'll go ahead and open that up this time. Okay, as there's no public comment, I'll close the public comment and we'll move on to our next item. Public hearing for Western Hills General Plan Amendment from community commercial to low density residential and rezone from agricultural R110 to R19 located at approximately 50 West Aspen Hills Boulevard. Ridgepoint Management Group LLC is the applicant, and Planning Director David Stroud will present for us.
Planning Commission, this is a carryover from the previous meeting. There was an error in the notice, so we had to include a different additional part of the property as far as the zone. And there'll also be a general plan amendment to it as well. Property you can see identified here on the map. We'll get a little closer on some other drawings. But again, we're off Aspen Hills Boulevard. The applicant is requesting to go from R110 to R19. There will also be a general plan amendment from community commercial to low density residential as well. The property here, this is the general plan map, which is the future land use of the property or what zones that the council has deemed appropriate for future use. The yellow you see is low density residential. The orange is community commercial. And so the applicant will be requesting to change just the orange portion of this property to low density residential. The zone requested on the map to R19 is a component of the low density residential designation. So there's no need to change that as far as the general plan map goes. The R110 and R19 zone are both components of it, the low density residential land use. This is the concept plan. So just some bullet points here. The R110 density, it comes in at 3 lots per acre with the 1,250 square foot minimum dwelling. The R19 density is 4 lots per acre with the same 1,250 square foot. What the applicant is proposing at 38 lots over footprint, they'd be footprint lots. 38 footprint lots over 12.6 acres, that comes in at 2.99 units per acre. The R110 and R19 open space requirement is 10%. And the footprint lot open space requirement is 35%. And then Prop 6, to bring up Prop 6, right now Prop 6 says 73% of the city would be single family residential, detached, excuse me. Currently we're at 72.64%. If we were to add 38 additional, they are single family because they are individual, they are detached. If we were to add 38 more units to the recorded lots, that would then put the single family at 72.72%, still under the 73. Commissioner Cunningham asked for a trail plan. So currently on the screen now is the trail plan. What is solid is existing. What is dashed is on the trails master plan. Now, obviously, where we see the dashed line, there's some flexibility, obviously, in there. It's not going to go through, for instance, the church site. Also, would it make sense to, once the canal is buried, would it make sense to have a trail 20 or 30 feet from an existing sidewalk? Probably not. Those details as far as where the trail goes, the trail's planning, that sort of thing, that'll actually come down later when the preliminary plat comes in with all the finer details. But the chair did want to see that as far as the future planning goes relating to the trails master plan. The recommendation is approval. The request does meet the general plan. It does fall under the approved densities from a planning aspect. So we have the findings and conditions you see here. And of course, you have the option to continue or to forward a negative recommendation onto the city council. This will be a public hearing, and then you will make a recommendation of approval, denial, or a continuation, whatever it may be, whatever is appropriate to the city council. Unless you continue, obviously, then we would meet again on this item.
Is that all you had?
Yes.
Is the applicant with us this evening? Would you like to come up and join us? Do you have anything you would like to add to the presentation? Okay.
Okay, I just wanted to make the Planning Commission aware that we have been working on this concept for several months. And several months ago, we had a neighborhood meeting with the neighbors, and we had, at that time, we had it as a high-density area. And we changed our concept plan after the input and the concerns from the neighbors, meeting it to a low density with the patio homes. We definitely are listening to the neighbors' concerns in the design of this concept. As Dave pointed out, we have 12.67 acres with 38 units, so we are considered a low density with this acreage. We do have a buffer that exists with the right-of-way to the Central Utah Water Conservancy District and the berm, which is at least 50 feet from our development to the edge of the Harvest Hill subdivision. We planned our concept with an R19 zone with a footprint plan with common areas so that we could have a planned community with an HOA to maintain the landscaping and the amenities with consistent care and uniformity of the open space and common areas rather than any chance that the landscaping would not be maintained properly. With the submittal of the preliminary plan, the preliminary plan will require a traffic study, and if the traffic study requires additional items, then those will be addressed at that point.
I forgot to have you state your name and address.
Sorry.
That's my fault, not yours.
Susan Palmer, and my address is 850 West, 1200 North, Mapleton, Utah.
Okay, thanks. Now you can sit down right there. This is a public hearing, so I'm going to go ahead and open up for public comment. I just want to remind you to try to stay to 3 minutes. Please state your name and address when you start your comments. And then if you have, try not to repeat comments. The time is yours. Go ahead. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Quinn Beal, 168 West Arbor Drive. I also own land close by this property. So part of my public comment includes input and quotes from my neighbors. While I maybe appreciate the applicant's desire to increase density to make another million or two, or to make a portion of this small tract of land that was originally part of a larger development more attractive to a developer, this change to an R9 simply leaves us with no benefit to the city, and for us to shoulder the burden of even more congestion or overuse of our natural resources. Let me start by stating our city's motto: life is just better here. By my count, and what was originally said was, it looks like 38 more homes, which than the R10 concept plan, which was submitted 4 years ago, which means at least 76 more cars. I'm unsure how this helps the overall space situation as it pertains to development to the south of this land, which was part of the original R10 zoning. The green space proposed will require even more water. We are dying of thirst right now. Water restrictions are becoming commonplace. This green space is of no benefit to the city or to the surrounding neighbors, so why add that burden? I see that there is a meandering trail to the middle of the proposed neighborhood. Currently, there is a berm and a trail next to it. The trail has always been intended to be part of the city's trail system. This particular trail is surrounded by awesome and inviting natural vegetation and is inclusive of all residents. This meandering trail could now inadvertently become part of an HOA who may decide to put up signs restricting the use, such as walking your dog. Speaking of dogs, I just randomly showed up the trail, and hey, the public is using it. It If it is meandering through a neighborhood, not going to happen like it does now with the natural vegetation that surrounds it. The city trail is used by families and residents all over. So really, let's conserve water, keep this open space native, keep the trail as part of our unobstructed trail system without putting up a neighborhood wall. Life is just better here, and this change from R10 to R9, maybe we should just vacate this motto to life is just busier here, life is just denser here. R10 is the right zone for this development as it was part of the land currently being developed across Aspen Hills Boulevard. Good parents are allowed to say no to the children without apology, without explanation, because it's just the right thing to say and do. We can be good stewards of our land and our resources and just say no to increasing density with no apology, no explanation. We have an overabundance of developable lots in our city. We also have zero need for patio homes or additional density in this area. Our sister city solves any remote concern of any need right across Redwood Road from this development that is already overburdening our roads and intersections in our own city. Zoning is a legislative decision. We don't have to change it. It is not the city's responsibility to make the applicant more money. It is the city's responsibility to watch the welfare of the entire town. So the question we ask ourselves, changing to an R9 and now increasing density in this section of the original larger development, is life really better here? I don't think so, and I admonish our commission to simply and politely say no and wish the applicant the best with the zoning they are lucky to have in our city. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi.
Welcome.
Jen Klingensmith, 287 West Ginger Place. My house backs up to the berm trail, so we're at the very southeast corner of Harvest Hills. And I did write a letter to you as commissioner, so I'll keep it brief. But I do agree with Quinn Beal that the traffic will increase, and I feel like the developers had this zone for a long time, and we, in the northern part of Saratoga, are surrounded by a lot of high density, and there's a lot going on when you consider legacy farms and other projects. So I would love to see this stay where it's at. I appreciate a meeting that I had with the planning director, but I still feel like the zoning 1 through 9, to say it's low density seems disingenuous, just because it seems like you're counting open space but lack of yards all at the same time for open space. So I still see it as a dense project. The houses are, I think it's an 8-foot setback one from another. That's certainly a lot denser than our properties that are all a third acre or larger. And so please consider that. I think I would love to just kind of see the density mirrored in the first phase that they're building onto the subsequent phases, but specifically the cul-de-sac Village B, I believe it is, that's directly behind Ginger Place. I feel like that's a very desirable area for quarter-acre lots or bigger, especially considering the phasing from my neighbor and our lots that are all a third acre or bigger. So thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. My name is Shelley Barch, 313 West Strawberry Place. I have lived in Harvest Hills for 20 years. I served on the City Council for 8 years, including the time that this was originally brought to us as a city. This was originally planned as part of the entire subdivision. The applicant mentioned that she wanted a planned community. This was a planned community. Originally, it had all the single families. It had the commercial area toward the front of the towards the Redwood Road area, and it was transitioning from those commercial areas that we needed so desperately against Redwood Road to the housing. As Jen mentioned, they have third-acre lots there. These quarter-acre lots that were supposed to be here would then transition that to the third acre. It also, if you talk about transitioning also between there and the condos to the north, the Hillcrest Apartments there, the transition per our own code in number 2A exception specifically states that buffering, landscape buffering, can also make that transition. This, with our 50-foot wide canal trail that is part of our master trails plan and has been part of our master trails plan for years, is also that buffer. To take what should be a regional trail system that is part of our regional trail system and do a meandering little tiny trail through these clustered homes changes the nature of the area. As was mentioned earlier, changing a zone is a completely legislative decision. This is not administrative, this is legislative. You absolutely can take into consideration, as you well know, what they call public clamor, right? The desire of all of those around. As you have heard, as you have read, this is not what the residents desire. This is not what the residents have been promised. We ask you to please recommend for denial this zone change. Also, a couple of other things to mention. If you look at the traffic that could cause, yes, it's only 38 additional homes. Yes, it's technically a low-density residential, but it is 38 additional homes. More specifically, you have an offset road intersection as you look between those two areas. It's going to cause some traffic issues. If you have the original concept that was brought forward with the other little cul-de-sac off the end, not only do you continue the master trails concept that we have had throughout, but in addition, you don't have any more of those offset intersections that can cause problems. Finally, the developer has had many years with this. They could have built before. Every time they bring it back, they try to increase the density. Over and over, they've been told, keep it what it was supposed to be, keep it what it was supposed to be. Also, and I realize that this part isn't completely developed yet, but at the intersection of the trails there are supposed to be more amenities. And I realize that details would be, forthcoming, but nonetheless, those haven't happened yet. And the trail was put in, so we actually had those connections so the kids could get to school. But nonetheless, if you're taking this and then all of a sudden changing that, again, that feel of this whole neighborhood, you're not going to have those gathering areas anymore. Instead, you're going to have all these clustered homes. We have some of these up in Harvest Hills, these footprint type homes, and it lasts about a year, and then everybody wants their own fences, and it breaks it up in these little tiny unmanageable areas, and you have no open space, or you have a trail crammed between two fences that are not pleasant to walk through and do not help with active transportation through different neighborhoods and developments. So again, I ask, please recommend for denial of this zone change, as is your legislative right. Thank you.
Any other public comments on this item? I'll go ahead and close public comment at this time. We have a few items from the public that was brought up that maybe we should have staff or the applicant address. The first one, I'm glad that I made sure we had a picture of the trails put in there because I was curious about that myself. So could we address, so right now it sounds like we don't know what's going to happen with the trail?
Well, yeah, what they're showing on the concept plan is just that, a concept. Should this be approved by the city council, they would then come back for a preliminary, and we'd have to look at it much more closely as far as all the city requirements go.
Okay.
Of course, with the city council, with most rezones, there is a development agreement that typically goes with a rezone. The planning commission's not involved in a development agreement, but you can certainly have the right to suggest a recommendation should anything be needed in a DA.
More cars was also mentioned, and I'm going to throw one other thing in that. There is not a light at the end of Aspen Hills, and with this going in, do we know, and Redwood Road belongs to UDOT, but have we heard from them when they might put a light in there?
I would default if engineering knows anything on that.
I think your mic's on. Hopefully it is. Is the light on?
The light's on.
Okay, cool.
We don't have an exact date, but we know that UDOT does have intentions to put a traffic signal at that intersection.
I know a lot of other times when we've done stuff with them, they have triggers that they look for before they put the light in. Do we happen to know what the triggers would be for a light on this one?
Excuse me. I am unaware of any trigger.
Oh, okay. Jeff, you can scream into the mic.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to take Scott's microphone, but when the east side of Redwood Road develops and that road is, fully constructed there, that's likely to
So the development in the city that should not be named across the street goes in, then we could see the...
And I believe there is some active applications in that city for development there. We periodically get notices, and I want to say I do recall one coming in for that property.
Okay.
Certainly close to Redwood Road.
All right. I know their too tall lights bother me. All right. I think we kind of addressed density before. Amenities was something that I had on my list as well. I know that we saw a concept years ago for I call it the circle or the nexus of the trails, because there's several trails that come into one spot there. And I believe that we saw something to approve that. So when would those improvements go in?
My recollections, and Sarah, I know, has worked on Western Hills here in the past. She could probably speak up as well, but I believe that was open space tied to the Western Hills project on the south side of the road, that was open space credit for that development. Of course, they are now platting and developing that property now. And so I would assume that at that point, and Sarah can clarify if she remembers, that now that open space will now be improved.
Okay. Fences is another good question. How, and that's one that I also have on my list. How would fences for yards work in this kind of situation?
On footprint lots, yes, you don't have an individual yard. You are allowed to fence in, say, like a patio area. But yeah, delineating, hey, this is a side property line, I'm going to run a fence up here. No, that's not something allowed by code. It's like any other thing in the code that if someone's doing that's against the code, we would have to enforce that.
Okay. All right. I will now turn this over to the commission for their comments and questions. Commissioner Kilgore.
Okay. I actually just have a few questions. Thank you for the thorough presentation and also for the comments. They're helping to shape my feelings about it, or at least add additional color to it. So one of the things seeing that Director Surratt, you had mentioned that actually by making this change, we're getting closer to what the Prop 6 target was for single-family homes. Is that correct?
Right. It would increase it to about 72.72%, where Prop 6 is then 73.
All right. So, I mean, by one measure, Prop 6 was a resident-initiated legislation, I guess. So, if anything, that's one way to say that we're also getting closer to what the residents wanted, according to, if we take Prop 6 as representative.
Right, and of course, Prop 6 being the general plan, state code allows general plans to be advisory, and in the case of Saratoga Springs, it is advisory, but of course, why do you have it then if you're not going to follow what your general plan says?
Right. Okay. So we know how many houses are potentially going to be added or will be added by this change. Do we know how many cars, actually?
Honestly,
Population.
There's no way to know. I mean, preliminary plat, stage, obviously, much more detail. You could do some trip generation reports. Obviously, the road classification there is, over the course of a day, would it, add much to the traffic? Probably not noticeable, honestly. I've done, as a side note, I've done studies on apartment complex where I sat and observed cars coming in out of apartment complexes. This is in previous employment, far less than most people had anticipated. And until you really have a concrete traffic study, it's really hard to kind of put a number on it. You could have a home there that has, an elderly couple, one car. Most if these are patio homes, obviously that's kind of a product probably geared more towards retired empty nesters. You probably wouldn't see a large family type situation. Like in my house, I've got 4 cars at my house. Sorry. But, that's just the nature of what I have right now. The product will kind of give you a guesstimate of what kind of traffic anticipation of cars. And if these truly are patio homes, I think that's probably the market. Obviously, no guarantee a 15-person family can move into one of these. We can't stop that. But I think that's generally what you would probably see here.
Okay. Having been reminded this is a legislative action, but we are required still, there have to be certain reasons for why we either recommend approval or not recommend approval. Even if it's legislative, it does have to tie to something like safety or, just resource concerns, things like that. Considering, some of the traffic issues and some horrible things that have happened just recently, I wonder if safety would be a good, one reason that if we were to recommend not approval, is that something that would pass muster as far as like legal is concerned?
Honestly, it could be. You probably have to tie it to numbers. Legal can maybe give a legal interpretation of, of that. Would you have to have a concrete number? This is your number of trips, and on patio homes, this is the number of your trips if it just went R110. Again, I don't know where to go with that one, honestly.
Yeah, that's why I asked.
It's
we knew how
difficult.
many cars would actually be added.
Are you being arbitrary? I don't think this will be safe. Something could be more safer, but can you back that up, I guess? And at what point is it still, are they still both relatively safe in the grand scheme of things?
Right.
Did your...
Yeah, hi. You just need to have a reasonable basis for doing that, and there does need to be some basis. So it can't be mere speculation. There does need to be a reasonable basis.
Yeah, and that's actually what I'm trying to find. If I could justify my mind, if we have such a reasonable basis, because talking about what triggers the putting a light in, how many. If we're talking about traffic, we need to talk about cars, but we don't really know. And so it's just hard to really put a number on some of my doubts.
Agreed.
Okay. Let's see. I'd like to ask the applicant, what was the reason for the rezone?
The reason for the rezone is because we felt like we have the larger ones and the transition from the Aspen Boulevard, you can have a street dividing the zones, and to go from the larger lots to this more of a planned community with the patio homes, and then the condos on the north. We felt like that was a reasonable thing, because the condos are higher density, we're lower density, so we're transitioning from each of the zones to a different compatible type of product.
So from that, you're saying that you feel that it is in the rezone puts your development. So you're saying that it is in step with what the community looks like as far as transitioning and.
Yes, it's transitioning, and we just felt like in this area, it has been an open space, and we want to keep it looking nice. And so we felt like if we did a patio home there, that we could be in charge of the HOA to make sure everything continued to be maintained properly. Right now, I know that the neighbors like the open area, that it's been an open area for a long time. And I know that they like that, but we just felt like this was a good transition and a nice thing, because a lot of people cannot afford a third of an acre right now, or a quarter of an acre with a $800,000 home on it. And so we feel like this is more of a place where people could come and they could, it'd be a nice community is what we felt. As we met, like I said, as we met with the neighborhood, we had planned townhomes, and I think when we brought it before the neighbors, we had I think it was 58 or more units in that area. And again, we listened to the neighbors to try and make it more of a compatible area with them. It's their single-family residents. They're not multi-family residents. So that's why we decided to try to use this concept on this area.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Kilgore. Commissioner Anderson, did you want, or no? Commissioner Barton, sorry he's not here, but the button is.
No, you're okay. So is this the time for questions if I have any?
Yes,
When's the
any
discussion
questions or
after?
comments?
Okay, when we make a motion and that kind of stuff?
Right.
Okay.
So any questions you have about the
I think a lot of the questions were answered. A lot of my stuff will come up when we discuss this with emotion. I'm really worried about the trails, as some of our public has mentioned and stuff like that, becoming part of the HOA instead of part of the city, so we're not able to use those. I don't know. I mean, is that something that could happen?
No, it would be a public trail. It would be a public access easement. If that indeed goes through the property like the concept plan shows, it would be recorded on the plat as a public access easement.
So it couldn't be taken over. They couldn't like
No.
restrict
No.
residents and stuff from using it. I have a hard time saying this is low density. I know it is. Excuse me, but I don't know. Okay, I guess I don't have any questions. Thank you for answering that one. I think most of these guys answered the questions that I had. I'll wait for discussion.
Commissioner McConkey?
I go back and forth on this one. I went and drove it last night, looking at from Harvest Hill's side, read through the emails that came through, and looking at things from maybe a black and white perspective. What is the city ordinance? What's the master plan? What's the concept plan? And I really go back and forth. One of the questions I have, in fact, can we look at the, David, the zones, the current zoning?
So current zone now is R110, and you got a little appendage there by Redwood's agriculture.
Both parcels are in R110.
Yes.
Is that correct?
And again, the ag piece by Redwood Road.
Right. So my first question is, if it remains in R110, what's the difference of potential between maintaining an R110 and making it an R19? Are we talking a couple additional homes? Are we? I'm looking at potential.
I'm
sorry.
I kind of eyeballed this, and I thought maybe 25. You know, obviously, they'd have to come through and provide something like that.
There was a concept plan that came through in like 2014 from this development, and it was handed out to us the last meeting, and there was 11 lots in there.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'll let you comment. Mine's coming.
And depending on how it's configured,
Right.
there is a water line easement that encumbers a good portion of the part of that property as well. So that would probably prevent
It's very limited on-
extension of some of those units then, lots.
So if we're looking at, in the current concept plan, 38 homes, is that considering the water easement and everything else that's going on in the background, so to speak, the limitations? Is this a reasonable concept plan that we would be looking at 38 homes?
Again, at a conceptual level, basically what a concept does is said, this is our idea.
Right.
Concept